The main exhibition at the Fry Art Gallery for 2020 is Random Spectacular, featuring familiar and rarely shown work from our permanent collection, which we hope will surprise, delight and amuse visitors. The majority of works have been chosen by invited selectors from various aspects of the arts, including artists, designers, musicians, writers and gallery curators. Here are some of the highlights.
Olive Cook, collage on grey paper, chosen by Michelle Thompson, artist and illustrator. I love this Olive Cook collage. I often use buildings in my digital work, but not so much in my collage work. I love the scruffiness and composition. In fact, I wish I was allowed to create more scrapbook-style work than the more polished photo illustration pieces.
The Attic Bedroom, watercolour 1932 by Eric Revilius, chosen by David Gentleman, artist, illustrator and designer. I've long liked Eric Revilius's Attic Bedroom for its masterly depiction of the intricacies of the complicated folding bed, for its overall composition dramatising the contrast between light and shade, for the minute detail of the plants and cacti, whether dark against the sunlit window or light against the shadowy patches in the background. But I also liked the painting because when I was a boy we had an identical bed which was unfolded and slept on outside when the wartime summer nights were warm enough. Morley College Mural Design, watercolour 1930 by Edward Borden, chosen by Tim Knox, director of the Royal Collection. I chose Edward Borden's charming design for a now destroyed mural for the refreshment room of Morley College, an adult education centre in South London. Borden collaborated with Eric Revilius on the murals, which were described by a fellow student, Philip Lewer, as a medley of grotesque figures: Caliban, several of his little brothers and sundry other members of his queer family, a lady with an aspidestra, another with a weather vane, and a third without a bathing costume, the hussy. Romeo with his Juliet, Lugubrious Prospero, and a miscellany of Shakespearean characters. A group of apartment house dwellers, evidently scarcely on speaking terms. The nucleus of a nudist colony, garbed chiefly in inadequate cloudlets. A chorus of sprites, angels, nymphs and things. A few animals, including a pair of shop-soiled horses, a moth-eaten dog and a black cat. And some curious blokes with harps.
Michael Rothenstein, Turkey and Farm Machine 3, Lino Cut, 1959. Chosen by Chloe Cheese, artist, illustrator and printmaker. This lino cut is drawn with great freedom, but vividly evokes the Essex farmyards of my childhood. When we lived at Bardfield End Green, the farm next door had a big black shed full of noisy turkeys, such large ungainly birds who were a bit silly and easily alarmed. The choice of colours and overprinting are beautiful. I tried to do something similar in my monoprints.
My Mother's House, a lithograph by Chloe Cheese, chosen by the artist and illustrator Jonathan Gibbs. My Mother's House tells a story, although it is not an illustration. I first saw Chloe Cheese's student work at the RCA. I've greatly admired it ever since in all of its manifestations, because Cheese excels in both the fine and applied arts. This example has a fine tracery of pencil drawing that underlies her subtle and expressive use of colour. The image is delicately linear while being precise and beautifully observed. Caravans, a watercolour of 1936 by Eric Revilius, chosen by the Times cartoonist Peter Brooks. Originally fever wagons in the Boer War or earlier in the Crimean War, the two caravans were bought by Eric and Tirzah Revilius in Partnegg, East Sussex. One was used as a bedroom and the other became a studio. For me, it is benchmark Revilius. His distinctive cross-hatched brushwork, the white of the paper showing through, and the muted colours combined with a sense of design second to none. There is a sense of mystery about it, of an unsettling otherworldliness. I've read that static caravans at the top of the track suggest travel, but never arrival. Perfectly put.
Tirzah Garwood, model of a chapel, circa 1947. Chosen by Anne Ullman, the artist's daughter and author of Hornet and Wild Rose, the art of Tirzah Garwood, published this year. Tirzah Garwood began a series of house pictures in print and collage in 1945. The model of a chapel is an exact replica of the nonconformist chapel at Hartest, near Bury St Edmunds.
York, the historic city, a poster for British Railways 1954 by Edward Borden, chosen by Yeston Davis, countertenor. Borden's British Railways poster advertises York with 3 scenes from its famous mystery plays, presented on the backdrop of St Mary's Abbey. Whilst an unusual design for a transport poster, my hometown of York wears its railways and medieval churches with equal pride, knowingly alluded to in its title, The Historic City.
Sheila Robinson, Cat and Windmill, print. Chosen by Francis Spalding, art historian, critic and writer, Chairman North West Essex Collection Trust. Here is a model Great Bardfield lithograph by Robinson. A domestic interior is linked to a rural scene by the gaze of a cat. Sentimentality is held at bay by the economy of means and the stringent design. It reminds me of Matisse's The Blue Window, painted in 1913. Sheila Robinson likewise suggests a moment when dusk arrives, workmen go home, and night time is not far off. Eric Revilius, Coronation Mug for Wedgwood, 1937 edition. Chosen by Angie Lewin, artist. Revilius's sparkling fireworks, lively numerals and lettering, the band of clear blue and splashes of bright yellow make his coronation mug a joyful and celebratory object. For me, it's the perfect example of an artist, skilled in engraving and lithography, collaborating with craftspeople in the ceramic industry.
That's What We Want. Lithographic poster for the Empire Marketing Board, 1931, by Edward Borden. Chosen by Mark Hurld, artist. That's What We Want. Dried beet pulp exemplifies Edward Borden's brilliance as a designer. The same liner-cut profile of a bullock, reminiscent of those encircling Grecian pots from antiquity, is repeated with suave economy and startling modernism 3 times on the left of this poster. Each one cleverly inked in a different colour with contrasting eyes. Blue, burnt orange, chestnut, in succession, stare out like bullseyes on an archery range. We are drawn in, and the design elegantly punctuated. Humour, wit, and great charm abound, and Edward Borden's playful eye for the absurd delights in picturing his cattle tongues agog, licking their lips at the promise of beet, plain or mollassed. Liverpool Street Station, a liner cut by Edward Borden, chosen by Sam Mullins, the Managing Director of London Transport Museum. This was my first introduction to Edward Borden's work. I love his big, colourful prints and the way they convey such a strong sense of place. Liverpool Street Station is much cleaned up since Borden captured its Stygian gloom, but it is on my daily commute to the London Transport Museum, with its long train snaking out into London's eastern suburbs and, of course, further afield to North West Essex.
Duffy Ayres, Portrait of Kitty Wilson, oil, 1945. Chosen by Anne Rothenstein, painter, and Duffy Ayres' daughter. This portrait is so like the Kitty I remember and used to stay with in Saffron Walden. She was a kind, authoritative woman, caught perfectly in this portrait, and her house, while welcoming, was quiet and dark in my memory, so like the beautiful muted colours of this painting. A very characteristic work of Duffy's, in style and mood from this period.
The Flying Dutchman, Mixed Media 1975, by David Myerscough Jones, chosen by the writer and broadcaster Oliver Soden. Made in advance of a 1976 television production of Wagner's The Flying Dutchman, David Myerscough Jones' drawing manages not only to be a practical design, but to evoke the entire musical world of that haunted and haunting opera. The wildness of his marks on the paper instantly calls to mind the fury of the wind and waves in Wagner's overture.
Eric Revilius, Neptune, watercolour. Chosen by Iris Weaver, founder and trustee, the Fry Art Gallery. The early accession number of this watercolour sketch by Eric Revilius has its roots in the formation of the Fry Art Gallery. It was given in 1985 by Edward Borden, when he noticed that the creation of an early exploratory exhibition was lacking any work by Eric Revilius. He returned home and immediately came back to the gallery with this sketch as a gift to the collection. He recalled how he and Eric Revilius, when students at the Royal College of Art, used to go through a connecting door to the V&A Museum and spent time sketching, and he believed this to be from a costume designed by Inigo Jones for a mask. Masks were expensive multimedia entertainment in the Stuart period, with spectacular costumes. Marianne Straub, design for the Thaxted Morris Men, waistcoat, 1952. Chosen by Eleanor Pritchard, weave designer. I've admired Marianne Straub's woven textiles since I first came across her designs for London Transport, whilst I was a student at Chelsea. She has always struck me as a weaver's weaver. The Thaxted Morris dancer's waistcoat holds particular appeal for me on several levels. The red and white fabric has a wonderfully theatrical feel, created by the dramatic cut-float structure. A perfect synergy of yarn, colour, structure and finishing. The English folk context of the waistcoat is also very appealing, and I love the way that Marianne Straub's fabric gives this age-old tradition a jaunty mid-century twist.
Tea at Furlongs, watercolour 1939 by Eric Revilius, chosen by Jonathan Christie, artist and designer. Anyone who has managed to find Furlongs within the folds of the South Downs will understand why it inspired Eric Revilius so much. The views and interiors at Furlongs, the home of his friend the designer Peggy Angus, became the subject of several of his paintings, and this perfectly composed 1939 watercolour of the view from the garden illustrates his sublime ability to capture the tranquility and subtle textures of this corner of East Sussex.
John Norris Wood, White's Tree Frog, etching. Chosen by Maggie Hambling, artist. This White's Tree Frog's delightful personality loudly echoes that of the artist. He closely resembled a warm, cuddly bear who loved every animal he encountered, as you always feel in his work.
Lifting Beat, watercolour 1941 by Tom Hennell, chosen by Richard Borden, artist. I admire the drawing in this painting. It has such vitality. Tom had a love and appreciation of the countryside and traditional craftsmen, values that I relate to. He was my godfather, but sadly I never knew him, as he was killed in the war. February Afternoon, oil painting 1958 by John Aldridge, chosen by Ian Beck, children's illustrator and author. An unprepossessing outbuilding with a corrugated iron roof, a glass roof and a fruit tree espaliered against the brick wall. In the mid-distance, a line of trees catching the last of the sun, and beyond them a cream-coloured house. These day-to-day things and places are entirely transfigured by the sense of winter light. It is late afternoon, and long shadows are starting to encroach like fingers across the bare soil in the foreground. The sense of looming darkness is visible in a deep shadow on the right, cast perhaps by a house. The sky is a pale, cold blue with a range of creamy clouds. It will soon be dark, but spring is not far off.